Hello, everyone. Oh, that audio just was not loud enough. That's okay. I'll wake you guys up with the actual presentation. It was this sci-fi, loud-sounding, kicking off the Foundry launch sort of noise. And alas, it's not there. But that's all right. We'll talk about other things. So I want to talk to you guys about what's happening on the internet today and how it sort of changes our approach to building things for the web. So all of you probably have things on the internet, and in particular on the web. And what the web looks like has been going through an evolution. So in order to sort of illustrate this evolution and talk about how we can cope and what are the things we need to think about today, I want to take us very far into the past of technology. Last year. So last year, this came out. Roughly about 12 months ago. This is the Motorola Droid Razr M on Verizon's 4G LTE network with dual quad-core Snapdragon processors. It has a 4.3-inch screen, 960 by 540 pixels, pretty good screen density, about 256 pixels per inch. It runs Chrome for Android, which is a different web browser than most versions of Android prior to this that came out had, because it used to be Android for WebKit. And it runs Android 4. The current version now is 4.3, or rather 4.3 is starting to come out. It's actually a Kit Kat bar. You guys eat Kit Kats here? Is that the one left or right, or is it give me a break? Give me a break. There you go. So that's one device. 2 weeks later, our friends from Samsung released the Samsung Galaxy Note 2. Also a smartphone, but actually more like a phablet than a smartphone, if you will. It's a 5.5-inch screen, higher screen density than the Motorola Droid Razr M on Verizon's 4G LTE network with dual quad-core Snapdragon processors. It runs Android WebKit instead of Android Chrome for Android. And it has 4.1, but it has a very heavily modified version of Android, modified by Samsung by essentially looking at what Apple is doing with iOS and meticulously copying every single detail, which turned into a lawsuit. You may have heard about it. 2 weeks after that, our friends from Cupertino released this. This is the Apple iPad mini. It's a 7.9-inch screen, but notice it actually has less pixels than the smaller sized devices we just walked through. Its screen resolution is only 163 pixels per inch, so it's much lower screen density. You can actually see pixels, God forbid. And it runs what used to be Apple's newest web browser and newest operating system up until September 18th, 8 days from now, when all that's going to change with the release of iOS 7. 2 weeks later, there was an onslaught of devices running Windows 8. Not the full version of Windows 8. It was Windows 8 RT, so it was a sort of pseudo version. This is one of these devices. This is the Dell XPS 12. It has a 12.5-inch screen, 1920 by 1080 pixels, comparable almost to what that Galaxy Note 2 has. It runs Microsoft's newest web browser, Internet Explorer 10, and as I mentioned, a new operating system from Microsoft. So in just an 8-week period here, we have multiple new web browsers, new revisions of operating systems, different screen sizes, form factors, screen resolutions, screen densities. And these just represent 4 out of about 46 devices that were launched last year in an 8-week period. If you've been keeping up with the news lately, the Motorola Moto X, the new phones coming out of Nokia/Microsoft now, the iPhone 5C and 5S. This onslaught of new devices is not going to slow down anytime soon. We had about 1 billion desktop machines to deal with back in the desktop internet, laptops and desktops. Today, we're facing a world where we're really quickly going to hit more mobile devices than there are human beings on planet Earth. Sort of scary, right? If you're reacting to all these things, like, oh, phablet, oh, smartphone, no, twisty phone, laptop, tablet thing, what to do? It can be really hard to stay on top of it. So I want to take a step back and see how have people dealt with this and what have they been doing, and then actually paint us a path forward. So all of this, of course, was kicked off by the modern incarnation of the smartphone. Yes, we had smartphones before these multi-touch things. They were called Treos. They had giant keyboards, huge, bulky antennas, right? They used to exist, but the modern smartphone really changed things for the web because it ran the full web. It didn't run WAP and WAML pages. It actually displayed the full internet on this small multi-touch screen. The first one that sort of kicked this off was the iPhone, but very shortly afterwards we had WebOS, we had Android devices all coming on board. And so people were really quickly able to understand, okay, there's this new thing, this smartphone. Let's put it over here. We kind of understand what that is. It's like a 3.5-inch multi-touch web browser thing. 2 years later, we had the modern version of the tablet. And yes, there were tablets before this. You could flip a Windows device around and write on it with a pen. I think Steve Ballmer used one for an hour in a demo. But again, the modern version of the tablet looked a little bit more like a giant iPhone, right? So the iPad, which came out about 2 years after the iPhone, is about a 10-inch multi-touch screen. And for a long time, when people thought about tablets on the web, they only thought iPad. And there was good reason for this. Even last year, when you look at usage on the web of tablets, the iPad had a really dominant share. It kind of went up a little bit mid-year. And Apple's numbers during their keynotes say it's still pretty high up there. So many people, when they think about building web experiences for tablets, think iPad. But if you look at sales, and now we're looking at sales data instead of usage data. It's always important to make a distinction there. But Apple, at the end of last year, only had about 46% of tablet sales. Samsung, Amazon, coming on really strong. Amazon, by the way, mostly in the US, although most Android tablet usage up until recently was mostly in the US too. So things change quickly in the industry. So we got this smartphone, we got these tablet things, and of course we have laptops that we know about and desktops that we know about. So what did people do? People had a website. You have website? Yes, you have website. So people had website, and they said, ooh, me make mobile website. Me make mobile website to deal with smartphone. Right? Because you sort of understand what the smartphone is, this 3.5-inch thing on the continuum. People in the commerce and retail space who saw sort of the advantage of tablets and saw a bit of increased conversion there, some of them went ahead and said, I'm going to make a separate tablet website and sort of create a unique experience for that world. So this is what people did to cope with this surge of new devices. But if we look at what's happening today, I don't think it's as clear-cut. So looking at our friend the smartphone, right? There's that 3.5-inch iPhone. Here's a 4-inch HTC Windows 8S. Here's our friend the Motorola Droid Razr M on Verizon's 4G LTE network with dual quad-core Snapdragon processors. You know, people never laugh the first time I say that, but by the third time it turns into a joke. I never understand it. Here's Nokia Lumia 920. Here is the LG Nexus 4, so the current flagship Android device. Does anybody notice something about this chart? They're getting bigger. In fact, in the past 3 months, about 30% of Android phones are over 4.5 inches. The iPhone 5, which is a 4-inch phone, sold about 5 million in the first 24 hours. Today, it's about 30-something% of iOS use. And there's all these rumors about Apple testing 4.8 and 6-inch phones. 6-inch phones? Who makes phones that big? Well, I introduced you to the Samsung Galaxy Note, 5.3-inch. Not to be left undone, Samsung also has the Samsung Galaxy Note 2. In the United States, the spokesperson for the Samsung Galaxy Note 2 is a fellow by the name of LeBron James. You may have heard of him. He can essentially take your head and hold you like this. He advertises this phone. He's like, it's a pretty small phone. And while these giant phones may be humorous, last year, 25 million of them got shipped. Again, not usage, ship. We'll come back to this point a little bit later. This year, 60 million of them are shipping. And you know, well, why stop at 5.5 inches? Because just 2 weeks ago, Samsung announced the Samsung Galaxy Note 3, which is 5.7 inches. Prior to that, they had released the Samsung Galaxy Mega, which was 5.8 inches. Now, the Samsung Galaxy Mega was a reaction to a competitor, Huawei, who at the CES convention in January released the Huawei Ascend Mate, which is a 6.1-inch smartphone. That is half a foot of telephone. Do you know what you look like when you talk on half a foot of telephone? This is what you look like when you talk on half a foot of telephone. Now, I said the Samsung Galaxy Mega was a reaction to the Huawei Ascend Mate, but you say, Luke, the Samsung Galaxy Mega is smaller. You are correct, because the Samsung Galaxy Mega actually comes in two varieties, including the Samsung Galaxy Mega Mega, which is a 6.3-inch smartphone, thereby besting the Huawei Ascend Mate. You may say, okay, 6 inches of phone. All right, we sort of hit the limits of reality here. Well, no, because this is the Asus PhonePad, a 7-inch phone. You may say, what's the role of a 7-inch telephone? Well, have you ever been out shopping for a new telephone? And you're at the store, and it's always the same choice. You're like, I can get something that makes phone calls, or I can get something fun. And you're so torn. Am I going to make calls, or am I going to have fun? You no longer have to choose, because the Asus PhonePad is fun and call in one. Consumer marketing wins again. Amazing things happen to you if you carry around a 7-inch phone. Let me illustrate. This man has an Asus PhonePad, and stairs for him are absolutely not a problem. The other thing that happens with 7-inch telephones, it turns out they're extremely attractive to the opposite sex. So you sit down on a bus, pull it out, and whoop. I won't show you what happens next. But rest assured, 7-inch telephones. Of course, our friends at Samsung heard about the 7-inch phone, and they're like, this will not stand. You know what? Screw it all, we're going to 8 inches. This is the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. And yes, it makes phone calls. Yeah, Mom? No. No, I can't talk. I'm a Google. I'm just going to pause for a second, because Samsung's an interesting company in terms of how they make devices. They have this lineup called Samsung Galaxy. Are you aware of this? Let me actually just show you what the Samsung Galaxy lineup looks like. It turns out that they have actually Samsung Galaxy Notes around the 10-inch, 9-inch form factor, including the Tab 3, the Tab 2, and the Tab. They also have things around the 8 and 7-inch, including the Tab 7, Tab 2 7, Tab 3 7. They also have things around the 6 and 5-inch, including the Mega, the Mega Mega, the Note, and the Note 2, and the Note 3. They've also got the Note, the S4, the S4 Active, the S4 Nexus, and the S4. They also have the S3, the S4 Zoom, the S4 Mini, and the Ace 3. Plus they've got the Ace 2, the Fame, the Ace 3, and the Young. I know what you're all thinking. What the hell's going on here? It's so un-Samsung-like to leave an entire inch empty. Good news, I have it on very good authority that they're working to remedy this situation, and the Galaxy Note Tab Mini Mega 9.0 is coming soon. And of course, they have things smaller than the 2-inch form factor with the ascent of the Samsung Galaxy Gear, a 1.63-inch miniaturized version of a smartphone dubbed a smartwatch. It even has a little creepy spy camera on the watch. But you can't turn the shutter sound off, just in case you had any bad ideas. Anyway, back to our things. And you say, okay, well, 7-inch phones. There's companies that are trying to make it actually really cool and sexy to talk on these things, by the way. All right. Oh, yeah. So let's stop for a second. Why did we do that? Well, whereas the smartphone used to be this fixed point on the line, you could kind of understand what it is. It's this 3.5-inch multi-touch thing on the spectrum. Now, things that make devices, or things that make phone calls and are mobile really run from right there all the way up to close to 8 inches. And I'm going to cut it off at 8 inches just to sort of stop the madness, right? But there's a full range of what is mobile. And right around 7-ish inches, something interesting happens, because that is where our friends the tablets begin. Again, it used to be the iPad about 10 inches. Now you've got things bigger than this. Here's a 10.1-inch devices from Lenovo, Acer, Dell, and Asus running Windows 8. These things are quite interesting because they actually run by a 16:9 aspect ratio. They're like 1080p. And when you run these things in landscape, you get this kind of layout with web pages. But when you flip the orientation over and you run these things in portrait, it's really a big dramatic change. And the layout that you have there does not make sense. To show this contrast, here's a 1366 by 768 and a 768 by 1366. It's quite a difference just from an orientation change, right? Very tall with these 16:9 aspect ratios. But we also have things smaller than 10 inches. Here's a 9-inch Kindle Fire. Here's an 8-inch Apple iPad mini. Here's a 7-inch Google Nexus. And I think you get the point, which is right where smartphones leave off, tablets pick up and continue this spectrum. Now people ask about tablets a lot. Are they mobile? What's going on in that area? What's been really interesting with tablets is the market changes very, very fast, because we went from a world where 7-inch tablets used to be 12% of the market. Now they're about 41%. And 10-inch tablets, where they used to be about 70%, are now down to 40%. So really quickly there's been this swing, where smartphones have been getting bigger, tablets seem to be getting smaller. Maybe they'll converge at some magic number. Who knows? With the onset of 7-inch tablets, a lot of people ask, well, should we count tablets as mobile? Are tablets mobile devices? Right? And if you look at where we used to be with these 9.7-inch sort of iPad screens, about 6% of iPad network connections are on cellular, on mobile networks. So if your definition for mobility is connecting to mobile networks, the iPad is not so mobile. 30% of time spent using the iPad is in front of the TV. 20% of time spent using the iPad is while in bed, reading about web design, I swear. So this is really more mobile in the home right now. It's not really necessarily mobile out in the world. That may change with 7-inch tablets, but we'll see. That was sort of the previous state of the tablet world, and that's been changing pretty dramatically. So we got 7-inch tablets running all the way up to about 11 inches, and you can guess what happens at 11 inches. That's where the laptops start. It's pretty much the smallest laptop size you can get. It's about 10, 11 inches. Apple's lineup starts with the MacBook Air, goes to the 13-inch MacBook Air, comes up to about 15, 17, and you can buy 18, 19-inch like Alienware game console crazy things for PC gaming. But this is about where laptops stop being practical. And again, right where laptops stop being practical is right where desktops start to kick in. The smallest size monitor you can buy right now is about a 17-inch display. And of course, Samsung has an entire lineup about every 2 inches, 17, 19, 21. If you can tell the difference between these, let me know. But then other manufacturers do the same thing, right? So here's Apple with the iMac at 21 inches, 27 inches. So our desktop friends really round out the rest of this picture. And I walk through this not to laugh at sizes of devices, but to illustrate a couple of really important points. So point number one that we learned by walking through this exercise is, where do you draw the line between mobile devices? What's a mobile device at this point? You may say, oh, well, let's measure the physical inches of the screen. If it can be easily carried, it's mobile. Well, on the web, there's no CSS property that tells you the physical size of the screen. So you can't determine that inside the web browser. And I say, okay, well, let's look at the pixels, right? Let's look at how much screen resolution it has. And if it's kind of smaller screen resolution, then it's a mobile device. Here is the Samsung Galaxy S4. It has 1080 by 920. Here is the Apple iPad mini, an 8-inch screen, and it has 768 by 1024. So you can't really use screen resolution to judge what's a mobile and what's not. Well, let's do feature detection. Let's see what makes phone calls, right? And then we're just going to detect and see if the thing can make phone calls. If it's a phone call, it's a mobile device. No, not really. The only way you can quote-unquote know what's a mobile and what's not if somebody arbitrarily makes some distinction and feeds something on your end, like a device library. So if you have something that says, oh, this is mobile, and somebody says, oh, I'm going to call that a mobile. I'm going to call that a tablet. Oh, I think I'll call this one a phablet. So it really comes down to sort of human judgment. There's really not a technical way on the web to do this programmatically. And so I actually think these labels of smartphone, tablet, phablet, laptop, they're not really very conducive to helping us think about design and helping us think about all the change that's happening. I like instead to think in terms of human factors. And what I mean by that is there's things that fit comfortably in our palms. There's things which are a little bit more conducive to lap use. There's stuff that really belongs on the desk or on the wall or on the mall. There's things which could exist on the wrist or on the eye. It's highly unlikely we will all become giants in the next 3 to 5 years, nor will we shrink drastically to Lilliputians over the next 3 to 5 years. So human factors are really more of a long-term way of looking at this. And the other thing about this really starts to drive use cases and allow you to think about human behavior and posture with technology. I'm going to interact with lap-sized devices differently than I interact with wall-sized devices. I'm going to have different viewing distances. I'm going to have different interaction types. So it helps you classify things a bit more. The other lesson we learned from walking through this is we are dealing with a full-size continuum. There is no gap from the smallest of screen sizes to the biggest of screen sizes, right? Everything is sort of fair game. It's a fluid continuum from the smallest to the biggest screen. We no longer have these really clear points where we say, this is a smartphone, this is a tablet. And those lines are even going to get more blurry. But before I do that, let's actually take a look at, so it's cool, there's lots of different size screens in the world, okay. But what are people actually using? Remember I kept harping on, this is sales data, this is shipment data. Flurry, which runs mobile analytics on about 1 billion smartphones and tablets, they looked at 2,000 unique devices in a month and looked at what represented about 80% of that use. And what they did was, come with me on this animation. Ready? Here we go. Whoop. What they did was, sorry, I worked all night on that one. And there's no love for the keynote animations here. That's all right. You guys got businesses to run. You don't care about that, right? So what Flurry did is they said, hey, there's small-sized smartphones, things below 3 inches. There's medium-sized smartphones, 3 to 5 inches. There's phablets, 5 to 7 inches, which is, by the way, phablet is now in the Oxford Dictionary, along with twerking, so that tells you something. They have small-sized tablets, and they have full-sized tablets, which are about 8.5 inches up. So they created their own classification. Now you start to see why I actually like this human ergonomics classification a bit more. And one of the things they looked at is what percent of all the devices they have fit in each range. And what they found is across this billion sets of smartphones and tablets they had, 16% were small smartphones, about 69% were medium, 7% were full size, and then the rest were in this sort of phablet to small size range. So that's interesting. That's how many of these are out there. But that doesn't really tell us anything about usage. Sales, shipments, usage, always very different. Usage is sort of the big daddy in the room. So if we, instead of looking at device model breakdown, look at number of active users, sort of the percentage breakdown of active users on these things, we find something very interesting. Small-sized smartphones, which were 16% of device models, have dropped more than half to only 7% of active users. Medium-sized smartphones went from 69% to 72%, and full-size tablets nearly doubled. You push this even further if you look at active sessions. Oh, whoops, and I didn't include my active sessions data. But if you look at active sessions, this stuff gets pushed even farther with small-sized smartphones going down to about 4%, medium-sized smartphones going about to 76%, and this staying roughly the same. So when you actually look at the data, you know what you find? People use their smartphones a hell of a lot. Full-size tablets get a pretty good amount of engagement relative to how many of them are out there. And small-sized smartphones under 3 inches, there's still a bunch of them out there, but nobody's really using them that much anymore. There's probably a whole bunch of BlackBerries people still have, but don't really do much with. So that tells us a little bit about activity between these things. Now, another way people have tried to cope with this situation of dealing for this multi-device web, which is we've got websites, we have all these new things coming out, is they've drawn a different kind of line. They haven't drawn a line by saying mobile, desktop. They've drawn a line saying, we're going to create a touch experience, and everybody else will get our existing cursor and keyboard experience. Lots of companies did this. Facebook did this. Facebook did touch.facebook.com. LinkedIn still has this, touch.linkedin.com. Salesforce, touch.salesforce.com. Taking the strategy of splintering their interface on the web into a touch version and a quote-unquote regular version. And on the surface, this strategy makes a little bit of sense because if you look at smartphones, you look at tablets, the most popular OSs, whether they're Android, whether they're Windows Phone, whether they're iOS, they run touch. So you kind of can say, all right, well, that's what that is. But let's, once again, peel back the covers, and I introduce you to the Lenovo IdeaPad Lynx. Who says this is a laptop? No one. One. One person out of so many. Wow, okay. Who says this is a tablet? Okay, 3 people. Who says this is a lablet? Tab top? Convertible. Ultrabook? Hybrid. How about the Lenovo ThinkPad Twist? Lablet? Tab top? Convertible? Ultrabook? Hybrid? This is the Lenovo IdeaPad Yoga. They call it yoga, but I think it's actually a little bit more like a transformer. Have you guys seen the Transformer movie, right? So they make this kind of noise. If you ever played with Transformers as a kid, it's unclear if this is an Autobot or a Decepticon. You sort of have to rub the sticker, and it changes colors. Does anyone remember that? 2 of you. Here's that Dell XPS 12 that also does a... You could be like, Luke, I don't care about Transformers. I like Star Trek. I'm a Star Trek fan. Okay, well, I got something for you there. Have you seen the new movie? You may have seen the new Star Trek movie, but you may have missed out on a key character. Oh, there he is. Did you see that? Hold on, it's coming. There he is. Always in the most important scenes does this character arrive. Oh, hell, I can't wait. It is a laptop in the shape of the Enterprise. Somebody actually made and shipped a laptop in the shape of the Enterprise. Don't worry, you don't have to use it in Starfleet mode. You can use it in robot mode. That's more comfortable for you, right? You can use it in kiosk mode if you'd like as well. It's also viable. And we can laugh at some of these Windows hybrid, convertible, ultrabook, tablet, lablet, whatever you want to call them, devices. But the bottom line is this is sort of what Microsoft is doing. And in the sort of dark cloud that is Windows 8 for Microsoft, some of the only bright spots are really that these hybrid sales are looking much better than traditional notebook and laptop sales right now. So in the death of the PC industry, or whatever you want to call it, the hybrid guys are a shining beacon of light. I wouldn't say that. And before you go and say, okay, this is just Microsoft doing crazy things, I introduce you to the Chromebook Pixel made by our friends here at Google, which also features a touch screen. So touch isn't just down to smartphones and tablets anymore. And again, I walk through this diagram because it really raises interesting questions. How do you determine what is a tablet and what is a desktop now? If I can take the screen out and start using it as a tablet, if I can twist it around, if I can transform it into a starship, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a tablet or are we dealing with a laptop? What kind of interface should we serve if we have a separate touch site? Should we serve the touch-optimized interface or should we serve the desktop mouse interface? We can't detect if a keyboard is present in the web browser. The other thing that we learned from this is whereas you could say, over here is touch, over here is cursor and keyboard, now touch actually pushes much deeper and goes all the way up to our laptop sizes. Well, thank goodness no one would ever put touch on a desktop machine, right? It's not like you could take something like the 20-inch Sony Tab Vaio, clearly a desktop machine for productivity, and turn it into a tablet, much less a multi-touch tablet. Right? Who would do that at 20 inches? Well, there is a certain class of people, and they are known as those who do. And those who do know that a 20-inch multi-touch desktop device is not enough. They say, let's go to 27. So this is the 27-inch touch base. It's got kind of this interesting touch interface. What they don't tell you in this commercial is very attractive to rabbits. So if you actually leave, oh, there's one. You may find that they've taken this device from you. And of course, here they are. Once they figure out the sort of radial menu system, which it turns out children can do, then they can get to drawing. And you may say, Luke, that's cool, but does it make phone calls? Yes. Here comes Mom to answer the 27-inch tablet. She's going to bring that bad boy over to the living room so that she can take the call from her friends who live in the Matrix. There they are. Now, because they live in the Matrix, they can essentially materialize anywhere, right? It's all just bits. So instantly, as soon as she hangs up, there they are. When your friends from the Matrix come over and you have a 27-inch telephone, what do? Well, you could look at photos and the like, or what you could do is essentially turn it into your own version of Las Vegas. By the way, the chiropractic bill does not come with this telephone. Well, thank God there's still Apple. Like Steve Jobs would be turning over in his grave multiple times if somebody put touch on his beautiful 21-inch and 30-inch iMacs, right? Well, it kind of doesn't matter because there's this little thing called the Leap Motion. And the Leap Motion you can attach to any screen, essentially have three-dimensional gesture control in the air of it. It is now bundled with Asus computers. It will be bundled with HP computers. And as a web design guy, I note that when they show this picture in the New York Times, they've actually blown it up 3x for this demo. Why would they blow it up 3x for this demo? See that little cursor? It's a finger, right? So it's much more like a touch interface with touch-size targets and touch gesture controls than it is a mouse and cursor interface. The other interesting thing about this is good luck detecting whether or not touch is present on one of these HP computers because there's no touch screen. But there is touch. Another sort of mystery. But what we kind of have to do is just assume touch is pretty much everywhere. It's not isolated to smartphones and tablets. It runs this whole gamut. And you can say, Luke, all right, well, at least I don't have to worry about cursors and keyboards on smartphones and tablets, right? Nobody's going to put a cursor like a trackball or a keyboard or anything on these things. Why would anyone do that? Well, here is the, let me show you that one. Here is a trackball on the HTC Nexus 1. Here is a keyboard on the Samsung Captivate. By the way, there's a game on the internet. I don't know if you've ever played it. It's Android Device or Condom. I basically say a name, and you have to tell me if it's a condom or an Android device. HTC Desire. Samsung Captivate. You'll be wrong half the time. Here is the Motorola Droid Razr M, keyboard, trackpad, cursor, right? So not only do we have cursors on these devices, we actually have keyboards on them as well. And if you ever go out and about into the world, you will see lots of people with keyboards attached to their tablets as well. So cursors and keyboards are not limited to this side of the spectrum. They really run the whole gamut. And last but not least, there's actually one more thing we need to take into account, which is this whole idea of high-resolution screens. So again, our friends in Cupertino sort of forced us into this when they introduced the Retina display. So many pixels the human eye cannot see one. And that was 326 pixels crammed per inch on a screen. Then they went and did it on tablets, 297 pixels per inch. Then they went and did it on laptops. A little bit less pixels per inch because the viewing distance is different. You've got about a 2-foot viewing distance on a laptop, 18-inch viewing distance on a tablet. So they do less pixels per inch, but you basically have the same effect of not being able to see pixels. The Google Chromebook, which I mentioned earlier, has actually done one better because their display is 239 pixels per inch. So even higher resolution than that MacBook Pro. And if there's one thing we've learned about Samsung today is that they will not leave a spec sitting idly by. Right? If they can beat it, they're going to get in there and beat it. So I introduced to you the 5-inch super wide full HD AMOLED 441 pixel per inch screen. This is, whereas the other one was Retina Vision, this is Fly Vision. So if there's a fly buzzing by you and he's looking, he's like, I cannot see a pixel on that. And of course, why stop at 441 pixels per inch? Because LG, about 3 weeks ago, introduced the Quad HD 4X display. 538 pixels per inch on a 5.5-inch screen. Let me just illustrate what the heck that means. That is a 5.5-inch screen with 2,560 by 1,444 pixels, which is the same as a 27-inch iMac on 5.5 inches. So this HD screen thing is not going on. The HD screen thing matters because as more devices go HD and you want to go sell things, you don't want those things that you're selling to look like crap to all these people, right? So we sort of have to deal with that as well. And I'm going to cut off high DPI screens over here right around 15 inches because it's currently prohibitively expensive to build high-definition displays higher than that. But you tell me whether or not this gap is going to get filled in. Anyone have an idea? Yes, it will. So this is kind of the lay of the land of the things hitting the web in large numbers right now. And let's say we want to build something for this. Let's say we want to create a website, a web application, a web page. Let's say we want to build something for this environment. Well, it turns out, based on this walkthrough, we actually have to do a couple of things. One, we've got to support this whole continuum of screens, because it's no longer this is a smartphone, this is a tablet. Everything sort of runs that full gamut. We have no gaps. Two, we have to account for high resolution, because high resolution is starting from mobile, making its way to tablets, and soon will be everywhere as well. Three, we want to actually optimize for touch, because you can use an interface created for touch very easily with a mouse and keyboard, but the opposite is not true. It is not easy to use a mouse and cursor interface with touch. The targets are too small. You can't actually interact with it. You make lots of errors. People get frustrated. They bail out of flows. But while we begin with touch and make sure that touch works well, we still want to support cursors and keyboards, because there's plenty of those out there. So we want to cut those people out. So there's 4 things we can do to kind of reshape our multi-device thinking. But I want to add one more to the list here, because I don't think we're quite done yet. What happened when people had a website and they decided to make mobile website, a lot of times they did this sort of quickly. And the conversations went something like this. OK, what should we include in mobile website? What are people on mobile going to do? What does business guy on business street doing business thing need for mobile? And people made a lot of assumptions, like people won't do this on mobile. People won't do that on mobile. There was a lot of this sort of cut, and you ended up with lots of mobile experiences that had limited features, cut down content. If you've ever been redirected to the homepage of a mobile site when you're trying to find a piece of information, you've experienced this problem. If you've ever gotten a message that says this information is not available on mobile, you've experienced this situation. Right? So these mobile experiences many times were subpar. They weren't as good. And that's frustrating in lots of ways, because more people are spending more time on mobile than anywhere else these days, depending on where and how you look. Let me give you the one stat that I've been sort of shocked and stunned by, but really illustrates the opportunity. In the past 3 years, smartphones and tablets have doubled online time. That means in the 20-plus years that we've had the web before then, all that online time that we mounted through all the devices we put in there, in the last 3 years, it got doubled. What do you think is going to happen next year and the year after that? Right? There's about 3 million mobile devices entering the planet per day right now, compared to 371,000 children. So this stuff is not going to slow down anytime soon. The mobile opportunity is really the opportunity. Right? Mobile is sort of the harbinger of this multi-device ecosystem. So we really give a crap about the mobile experience, which it pains me when services have these great desktop experiences, like this is Marriott, a major hotel chain. And I'm going to a conference at this convention center. I arrive at the airport. I pull out my phone, and I say, hey, how do I get to the hotel? Is there a shuttle? Of course, it redirects me to m.marriott.com. Thankfully, they have some of the same information here, but the one piece of information that they chose to exclude, in addition to all the other niceties, is this: airport shuttle service. Because no one on a mobile device will want to arrive at the hotel from the airport, right? And this is one small example, but you find this stuff all the time, where people assume the mobile experience is the dumbed-down, simplified version. Now, all of our sites can go on a diet everywhere, but I'd contend if it's important to you, it's important whether somebody hits it with a 4-inch screen, a 7-inch screen, a 12-inch screen, or a 30-inch screen. Right? There's stuff that's important to our business and our customers that matters on the internet, regardless of screen size. So how do you get around this? Well, you build and design things from the mobile experience outward. So when you build from the mobile experience, you make sure that you prioritize things, you make tough decisions about what's most important and what's secondarily most important, and you hold on to that prioritization as you extend stuff outward. Right? So you start from the baseline experience, you make sure it works well in these constrained small screen size form factors and things like this, and then you extend as you go outward. So the 5th piece to multi-device design is working mobile first. Work mobile first, support discontinuous screens, deal with high resolution, optimize for touch. And this 5-prong methodology comes with some good news. In order to deal with all the stuff that I was talking about at the beginning, all the walkthrough I did of all these devices and all these inches, In order to deal with that world, you only need one design. You only need one sort of web experience, a multi-device web experience. So that's the good news. The bad news is building in this way is not how we've been making web pages for the past 20-something years. Right? It's a very different way of creating and building for the web. But that way of building and creating for the web, I think, actually has tremendous upsides. So let me illustrate some of those. So one of the questions I get about this when I talk in this manner is, okay, Luke, well, if we're going to start from mobile, are we just going to end up with a really crappy desktop experience and we still have people on the desktop doing stuff? So if we do this, are we going to have something that doesn't work well when we get to bigger screens? And so let me actually show off a couple examples. So this is an e-commerce experience where you can buy ties that are skinny. And you'll note, if you're on a small size screen, you can browse by patterns, by widths, by colors, by fabrics. If you happen to hit it on a medium-sized screen, you can do the same. If you happen to hit it on a large-sized screen, you can do exactly the same. In fact, they take advantage of the larger screen space to show you larger images, to give you a more in-depth sort of visual flow through here. If you find a tie bar you like, great, you can go ahead and add it to your cart, and you can go and start the checkout experience. And of course, that checkout experience flows naturally whether you're on the largest screen, a mid-sized screen, or a small-sized screen. So regardless of what size screen you happen to be on, you can jump in there, buy a skinny tie, buy a tie band, and you can say, each piece of this works across this continuum of screens as I outlined. Now, these guys were kind enough to go and share the results of this redesign. Kind of talk about what they saw when they went from a static desktop web page to a full multi-device world. They saw 42% revenue growth on all devices and a pretty decent conversion rate increase. That's nice. Maybe they just came up with a better design, right? This doesn't tell us anything about supporting all these different screen sizes. All this tells us is they made a better design. But here's the numbers that you start to see very consistently, and I'll show a couple of these examples to hammer this point home. Their iPhone revenue and their iPhone conversions shot up way higher. And why is this? Because they went from a world where there wasn't an experience created for that size device to one which was optimized for it, to one which was designed for it and had it in mind. And you find this pretty commonly when people go and build for experiences in a multi-device way. Building something that's just right for a particular type of form factor is way better than serving one generic thing to everything and not caring about that device at all. Here's another illustration. So if you are a freak and you like shorts, you might like Freak Shorts. O'Neill is a company that sells Freak Shorts. And as you can see, it's another adaptive experience. This is not even particularly that good an experience. It's got a decent desktop experience, but then you get to middle-sized screens, how that list gets so janky, and then it finally flips into a mobile thing. So it's not even like they've really done that much work. They basically created a small screen view and a big screen view and made it slidey in between. But similar story. When you look at the specific device metrics, and now that they have an experience that actually works well, the revenue on those places grows tremendously, and overall it does better too. So it's probably a decent redesign in general, because non-mobile revenue grew as well. But across all of these, when you look at the revenue growth in the places that did not have a good experience before, it's way higher than the overall numbers. One more, and again, I'm deliberately showing things that aren't really that sophisticated and crazy. So this is a service which sells giant decals. They sort of do a lot of branded sports products in the United States. And as you can see, it's an adaptive experience. It's got sort of a large screen, mid-size screen, small-size screen flow. They also were kind enough to share their statistics. 90% increase in mobile conversions, 70% increase in revenue per user, but here's the same story one more time, 538% increase in mobile revenue per user. And what happens to a lot of web experiences, you hear similar stories. Oh, our mobile use is only like 15 or 20%. Well, if you're serving a crappy experience to them, of course it's really low. These guys saw their mobile traffic year over year increase substantially, and they attribute it all to that redesign because now all of a sudden people could do things on those devices. And it's not just places where we're dealing with e-commerce and revenue and conversion and things like that. We're starting to see these techniques emerge everywhere, in large brands, in all sorts of organizations. So here's time.com, and again, time.com has an adaptive experience that starts from the smallest screens and fits in on the largest screens as well. And when these guys did this, 23% increase in mobile usage, this is usage, right? Time spent went up, bounce rates went down, all kinds of stuff. And of course, pages are up across the board because it was probably a better design in general, which is, again, that common theme. Now, the other point that people raise about building for the web like this, which I'd like to address, is they say, okay, Luke, well, that's cool, but aren't mobile users different? Aren't tablet users different, right? If we're serving the same kind of experience to everybody, are we not taking advantage of these unique use cases? Like, isn't the mobile user on the go? Isn't the tablet user asleep in bed, right? How do we make an interface specifically for that? And so the question is, I'll summarize that again on my little chart, which is not only great for pointing things out, but also great for asking questions, is don't people use these devices in different ways? And the answer is, yeah, to a certain extent they do, but a lot of our assumptions about how they do are flat out wrong. I'll talk about why in a second. But one place where you can actually have hard data that illustrates people, for example, use mobile devices differently is if you have a physical location, a theater, a restaurant, something like this. What you will find in your logs is that mobile traffic tends to go more often to pages like visit us, getting us here, parking. There's just a higher percentage of traffic on mobile to those kinds of pages than you would see on desktop devices. So here's a difference, right? And so what you can do with this type of design approach is you can emphasize that. Here is a children's museum in Pittsburgh, and you'll note in the small screen there's a big visit us, call us, and find us link. But the full menu is there. You can still search everything and interact. And as you expand to larger screen sizes, visit us and call us sort of fades back in priority. It's still accessible because people on the big screen still want to get to the museum, right? They still want to be able to call it. But we sort of shift the priorities of the content a little bit. Instead, on the larger screen, we're saying, hey, we got a larger screen. Let's merchandise the features. Let's kind of take advantage of the fact that we have a bigger page. On mobile, we deal with the fact that people are likely to, oh, I'm sorry, my slide skipped here. On mobile, we deal with the fact that people are more likely to do certain things, like figure out how to get there, but we still include the merchandising. We don't get rid of it. Because I could be on my couch figuring out whether or not I want to go to this museum and on my phone. And then here, we adjust it, right? So we got a bigger screen, great. Let's use bigger images. Let's merchandise things more. Let's adapt to what makes each experience good. And this, I say people sort of make mistakes around mobile assumptions. What really has happened with all these different devices, what we've done is we've increased online time. So if you look at, this is where people read news sites on the web. What does this tell us? People are asleep, they go to work, they read the news, they go home, they go to sleep. This is when people read those exact same news sites on tablets. And what do you notice? Oh, now in the morning they're reading the news, and now when they get home they're reading the news. Do you think they're doing something fundamentally totally different on this news site here on the tablet than they are at the office there? They're pretty much reading news, right? BBC's Olympic coverage last year really illustrates this point well. They did a similar analysis across different device types, and I really like this quote here because it points out what I'm getting at. PC usage had a spike during the day at work. Tablet usage had a big spike at night when people came home. But mobile is happening 24/7. It's occurring anywhere and everywhere, right? People are using these devices everywhere. And so mobile sort of becomes the meta use case. When you build for mobile first and you design that mobile experience, you're focusing on something that applies to people 24/7, anywhere and everywhere, which these other devices actually don't do. They actually have a bit more of a context. And the other part about it, there's actually data that illustrates mobile is not as mobile as we think. Our friends at Google who are hosting us did a big study on this, and they actually said 77% of mobile searches are happening at home or at work, not out being mobile. A new study came out recently that says 68% of all smartphone use happens in the house, on the couch, on the loo. You call it a loo? What do you guys call it? Potty? Potty loo? Loo potty? But at the same time, there is a certain degree of context, because that same Google study says, hey, we're 2x more likely to do a shopping search when we're in a store. Now, this doesn't mean, like, if you detect someone's vaguely in the vicinity of the store, you should pop up a giant shopping search thing on your front page, right? Because they may be trying to find directions to the bathroom and be near a store. So until we have a little bit better technology to really understand what people are doing and how, a lot of our mobile use cases tend to be a little exaggerated. So what I say instead is if you got real data that certain things are different on certain devices, great. You can still use this methodology and just sort of adjust the priorities and presentation of things through layout and design, like we saw with that children's museum. This doesn't preclude building things specifically for specific experiences. But at the same time, if we start with mobile and we build there, we're going to make sure that we cover anywhere and everywhere use. Right? We're not going to let things drop off the map, and we're going to make sure everybody gets taken care of. So, build and design mobile first. Support this kind of continuum of screens. Lead with touch. Support cursor and keyboards. And with that, we actually have a pretty decent methodology for building for the existing web right now. So rather than talk about other crazy questions, and just to give you a hint of where else we can take this, I think there's other viable questions that emerge on the web right now, such as, what's in that direction? Luke, you sort of stopped it at desktop screens, but isn't there more to talk about there? Other viable questions also include, hey, what about that stuff? Aren't there things that are happening there that may be interesting to us? And of course, the one that everybody is most interested in, well, what's going to happen next? Right? Are there things that are coming that are going to sort of scare us? Probably. But rather than jumping into all those fun things, I will actually pause here and summarize that this is sort of the lay of the world today. It will change, as I sort of teased with my 3 slides there. But if we want to build experiences that are reaching the audiences we have now, I do think we need a different way of building for web. Right? We need something that accounts for this reality. And accounting for that reality is starting from the mobile experience, supporting this continuum of screen sizes, dealing with high resolution, high definition experiences, optimizing for touch, but still supporting the other input types like keyboards and cursors that are out and about. And with that, there's lots of things to learn, but it's also very exciting times because it's not the same old boring web design we've been doing for the past 20-something years. So that's my spiel. Thank you very much. And I think we got a minute or two for questions by my clock.
Luke, for that. If you do have any questions, guys, we've got time for 1 or 2 questions. So we've got some microphones if you just want to come down to a microphone if you want to ask Luke a question. Must be somebody with a question. I'm not sure if people are going to the toilet or what. Oh. Yeah, I'll come up to you. I'll come up to you.
Like those daytime talk show hosts. I like it.
Hi, my name is Valentina and I work for Hustle. My question is just where do the app come into this equation? Because in our website, when we ask the users to actually download an app when we are in mobiles, and we kind of thought that was the best option to give them because of, and also we see that now apps are on bigger screens. So I'm wondering how this tied into.
Yeah. So the question is, well, what about native apps?
Yeah.
Right? Let me answer that. So I think there's good reasons to do both. And many people, when they talk about native applications versus the web, it's this fight, right? Who will win, native app versus web? But it turns out there's actually really good reasons to do either one of these. Native applications, I would say, have always, even before mobile native apps, have been about richness. They allow you to tap into everything the device can do. They're not sandboxed in a web browser. So you get access to hardware and to other kinds of capabilities that you can't do anywhere else. That allows you to create a richer experience. So if you can use those capabilities to make what you do faster and better, it's worth it. For example, Facebook famously went from shoving a web browser inside of a native app to using native app code, and they get 2x more engagement inside their newsfeed, which they have 78% of their monthly active users in the US are on mobile right now, so that's like crazy-ass stuff. However, the web gives you access to all platforms. So even if you build a native Android phone, Android tablet, Android TV, Windows 8 native phone app, Windows 8 tablet to desktop app, Apple TV app, Apple tablet app. You get the idea, right? Even if you build all of those, you still haven't hit all the platforms. And today, every platform comes with a great web browser. And it's not just about connecting the platforms, it's also about connecting the apps across platforms. You send email links? Yes. You send social media campaigns? Yes. All those things have links. All those things go to web browsers. So that access across all platforms, not just native app platforms, but apps as well. And then plus, you can also do things where if you build things for the web, there's opportunities to integrate stuff that isn't critical to have this richness inside of native applications. And there's strategies that can allow you to actually make development much easier and safer across the board. Not safer, but easier.
Okay, while I'm up here, does anybody else have a question?
My name is Gareth from CarTrawler. When you've seen a responsive experience, when it gets to the checkout process, do you think it's purely down to the quality of that, or is there differences across the devices when it comes to checkout in terms of what people expect and people's willingness to convert?
Yeah. So the question was, is there differences inside of the design of things like checkout on these experiences, or is it really boiled down to just the screen size and things like that? Let me actually illustrate that with a picture. If you guys give me half a second, I will show you a picture on this. I have like 40 decks in here, so I'm just opening up another one, and sometimes that takes a bit. So in particular with checkout, I think there's things that mobile actually forces you to do in situations like checkout that actually simplify things for you everywhere. And that's a good thing. So starting with mobile, again, creates a nicer flow. Let me give you a simple example of this. So this is Dell's checkout experience. And what they've essentially done is they've taken their desktop checkout form and they've shrunk it down to the small screen. So they've got this checkout experience, right, on the desktop. They go and put it on to the small screen like this, and they take all of it, including the ability to provide an extension number for your mobile phone and an extension number for your daytime fax number and the like. Right? So there's things that they're doing that are sort of silly, but when you come to mobile and you say, okay, we have an e-commerce flow, we need a phone number so we can get in touch with someone. If you see something that looks like this on mobile, what's wrong with this picture? You're on a phone. It's made for making phone calls. Do you know how you enter a phone number into a phone? Just do that. Now, if you really need to you're dealing with businesses, you need an extension, okay, great. We can give you the opportunity to add one. Or if you really need another number, we can give you the opportunity to add one. We also can use new input types, like input type tel. So this phone number now gets a nice, beautiful dial pad here. And that dial pad will come up whether it's on an Android device or whether it's on a pseudo-Android device, like the Kindle Fire running Amazon Silk, so on and so forth. And then if you really want to make input even nicer and smoother for something like a phone number, because people are on mobile devices, what you can do is throw in an input mask that restricts a format and prevents them from entering anything but a number. Sort of shows you the input. So what I'm illustrating here, here's like one single input in a checkout flow. And when I build it for mobile, all of a sudden I've drastically simplified it down from what I had previously on the desktop. Now that simplification that I'm doing here for mobile applies to these particular screens, but there's absolutely no reason that once I get it down to something nice and simple for a mobile checkout experience, I can't take that simplified, faster flow and put it on desktops, laptops, tablets, and God knows what's coming next.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Luke Wroblewski. Thank you.
Thank you.